Thank you so much for joining us again today for our look into the great classics. The work we're diving into today has been shaping minds for over 2,000 years. It's the Analects by Confucius, and what's so wild is that it's a collection of ideas from a man who, in his own time, was seen as, well, a complete and utter failure.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. We're starting with a massive paradox, right? The man who wrote these words, a man who warned everyone against people who were all talk and no substance, he ends up having his words memorized by millions of people 2,500 years later. So how in the world does that happen? Well, to get it, we have to look past the fortune cookie quotes and dig deep into the heart of his story, which is all about his failure.
Yeah, that's right. To really get why Confucius became one of the most important teachers in history, we first have to see just how spectacularly he failed as a politician. And he was trying to succeed in a world that had basically fallen apart.
You gotta picture the world Confucius was born into. It's called the Spring and Autumn period, but trust me, it was anything but peaceful. It was an age of absolute chaos. I mean, every system that society relied on had just crumbled. The idea of rule by family bloodline? Gone. The belief in a divine right to rule from heaven? Shattered. Even the most advanced system, the Zhao dynasty's focus on virtue and ritual, the very glue of civilization, had turned to dust. It was a total free-for-all, a massive moral vacuum.
And for 14 years, think about that, 14 long years, Confucius wandered around like an outcast in his own country. He was desperately looking for just one single ruler, anybody who would listen to his vision for putting society back together. And what did he get for his trouble? He got ridiculed. He faced deadly situations, was even mistaken for a wanted criminal and surrounded by soldiers. At one point, he and his students were literally starving to death, trapped between warring armies. By any and every standard, he failed.
But this is where everything changes. This profound failure as a politician sparked a revolution in his thinking. He realized, okay, if I can't fix the system from the top down by convincing the powerful, then I'm going to rebuild it from the ground up. He changed the game completely. He stopped focusing on the kings and warlords and turned his attention to the only thing he could change, the potential inside every single person.
So this new game, this lifelong mission of self-improvement, it all centers on one single, incredibly powerful idea. One character that defines the entire goal of his philosophy, Ren, or Ren. So, what on earth is Ren? You'll see it translated as benevolence or humanity, but those words don't quite do it justice. It's so much deeper. Think of it as the core of our humanity, the potential for goodness that Confucius believed exists inside every single one of us. It's the power that allows us to get past our own selfish ego and truly, genuinely connect with other people. In his eyes, it's what makes us fully human.
And this is the genius of Confucius. He doesn't just leave you with some lofty, abstract idea, he makes it practical. He says, look, Ren stands on two pillars. The first one is Zhong, or sincerity. This means being true to your best self and putting your whole heart into everything you do. The second pillar is Shu, or empathy. This is the simple, powerful act of understanding others by starting with yourself, by putting yourself in their shoes.
And that second pillar, Shu, leads us straight to what we all know as the golden rule. It's simple, it's elegant, and man, is it a challenge to actually live by. But that's the point. This isn't just a nice thought. It's a practical tool for everyday life. And every single interaction you have a way to practice Ren. Just stop and ask yourself, would I want this done to me?
So if you're playing this game of Ren, what's the goal? You're trying to become a Junzi, which we translate as a gentleman or an exemplary person. Now, you have to get how radical this was. Before Confucius, a gentleman was just a guy born into a rich family. Period. Confucius comes along and says, no way. A true gentleman is made, not born. It's all about moral character. The gentleman understands the difference between what's right and what's just profitable. They act first, then speak. This is the total opposite of the Shaoren, the small person, who only thinks about personal gain and speaks before they act.
Okay, so how do you actually do this? How do you get on the path to becoming a gentleman? Well, you can't just wish for it. Confucius was super practical. He laid out a clear set of rules for this game of self-cultivation. Think of it as a workout plan for your character. The first rule is all about learning, but for Confucius, this was all about balance. On one hand, he says, learning without thought is lost. If you just cram your head full of facts but never stop to think about what they mean, it's all useless. But then he gives you the other side of the coin. Thought without learning is perilous. If you just sit around in your own head thinking up big ideas without studying what others have learned, well, your ideas have no foundation, and that can be really dangerous.
This next one is fascinating. One of his students asked him what he'd do first if a ruler finally gave him a government job. And everyone expected an answer like fix the economy or build up the army. But instead, he gives this totally bizarre answer. I would rectify names. His student actually laughed at him, calling him out of touch. But Confucius was getting at something way more fundamental. So what in the world did he mean by that? His point was that for society to work, words have to match reality. A name or title has to mean something. If you call someone a ruler, they better act like a real ruler, with justice and care. A father has to actually act like a father. If they don't, the words become empty, and the entire social order just breaks down. It's like his famous question, if a special ceremonial cup loses its proper shape, can you honestly still call it a cup?
The final rule is about putting it all into practice through rituals, or li. Now, when we hear ritual, we might think of boring, stuffy ceremonies. But for Confucius, rituals were like the grammar of society. They structure how we interact with each other. From a simple handshake to a formal wedding, rituals are the framework we use to express our inner virtue, ren, in the outside world. They are the daily practice of overcoming our selfish impulses to act with respect.
But here's the ultimate question. Is this whole philosophy of being a gentleman just for when times are good? What happens when everything falls apart? Well, Confucius and his students faced that very test when they were trapped, surrounded, and starving in the wilderness.
His most loyal but hot-headed student, Zilu, just couldn't take it anymore. He went up to Confucius, and he wasn't just asking a question, he was making an accusation. He demanded, "Must a gentleman endure this kind of hardship?" What he was really saying was, what's the point of all this moral training, all this virtue, if this is where we end up? Starving to death?
Next up was Zheng, the practical, diplomatic one. He tried a different approach. He basically suggested a compromise. Master, he said, your way is too demanding. That's why nobody in the world will accept it. Why don't you just lower your standards a little bit? Make it easier for people to swallow. It was a practical plea, just trying to find a way for them to survive.
But then came Yanhui, his absolute best student. And his answer was a powerful reminder of their whole purpose. He said, the problem wasn't that their standards were too high. In fact, the higher the better. He said that we have perfected this way and it's not being used. That's the shame of the rulers. What shame is it to us? He got it. The failure wasn't in their philosophy. It was in a world that wasn't ready for it. And we're told Confucius was just overjoyed when he heard this.
And that resilience, right there, in the face of total despair, that's the true legacy of Confucius. The Analects is not some rigid, dusty rule book. It's not a list of answers. It's an invitation to start a lifelong journey of self-discovery and becoming a better person.
Confucius even used his own life as a map for this journey. He never claimed to be a born sage with all the answers. He saw his own life as a process, a work in progress. At 15, he set his heart on learning. By 30, he'd found his footing. At 40, he was free from confusion. By 50, he understood his purpose in the grand scheme of things. By 60, he could listen to anything without getting upset. And finally, at 70, his heart and his actions were in perfect sync. And this is probably the most important thing to take away from our talk today. This book will not give you a map with a big X marking the spot. It doesn't have a checklist for a happy life. What it gives you is a compass. It teaches you how to find your own bearings, how to ask the right questions, so you can navigate your own life.
And so, after all the stories and principles, the book turns its central, timeless question right back at us. This isn't just about how some ancient rulers should have lived. It becomes a direct, personal challenge. How should you live?
In the end, the philosophy of Confucius isn't something you just admire from a distance. It's a path that you have to walk. This explainer has just been a glimpse, a conversation starter. The real journey begins when you sit with the text yourself. He provides the starting point for that fundamental question we all have to ask: how should I live? So if you're looking for the beginning of your own answer, there's no better place to start than by opening the book. I'll see you next time with another insightful classic. Until then, take care.